Test, test, test. All right, well, hey, welcome to How to Write a Novel. I just got a new recorder. My old one finally broke, although I recommend it completely. It's the Zoom Corporation, Z-O-O-M, of Japan. I had a Zoom H4, and it lasted I had it since 2008. It survived through a house fire even. It's like crazy how long and how awesome that thing was. But it finally broke. So I got a new one, and I downgraded a little. It's still Zoom, but I got the Zoom H1. Because the H4 was a little too fancy. It had stuff I didn't need. The H1 is you just turn it on and record. However, because it's brand new, and I've barely used this thing, I just rambled for 10 minutes and didn't realize I wasn't recording. So, classic. There's a little red light that says record right on the front, I don't think this is going to be a common problem. I just literally somehow fucked that up. But yeah, I don't have all the settings quite figured out and stuff yet. One thing, it's a little windy. Even though I'm in the woods, it's surprisingly windy in here today. The sound might not be perfect, but it sounds okay to me. I think this seems okay. But okay, writing-wise, I'm still writing the final chapter of the book. It's still going incredibly slow. I'm literally at the point now where I'm pretty much, honestly writing a sentence a day sometimes, which I guess is not surprising to anyone who's been listening to all these. But this is the slowest ever. It's so slow. But I was like, that's fine, whatever. For whatever reason, this is how it works with me. As I get closer and closer to the end of something, it gets bigger and heavier and things go slower. Infinite regress. But I haven't stopped, and as long as I don't stop, it doesn't matter how slow it is. And it still seems valuable that it is slow. I'm definitely getting benefit from going slow that I would not get if I went too fast. So let me just give you a quick example. So last episode, there was still snow everywhere. It's getting to be pretty nice out, but the insects have not sprung to life yet. This won't last, but it's nice for now. But last episode I was talking about how I changed the last chapter of the book, where the basic finale of Surratt blowing up the space station is the same, but the old notes I had were from so long ago now, 5 or 6 years ago, that they were weird and didn't fit anymore. They were all imperious and I don't know, it's just strange. She's all excited about blowing up the space station. So even though that is still what's happening at the end of this story, the emotional tone is totally different. See last episode for details, but things are much calmer now. Now that I've spent the last 5 years slowly creeping my way through the emotional landscape of these two characters, the old notes, they didn't feel tonally appropriate anymore. So now what's taking me so long, again, where the irony of I thought this chapter would be very easy because I have so many notes and I do have the literal plot points already all laid out and have had for a long time. But it's going really slow because now I have to walk through this emotional minefield of just trying to determine what is going on in this emotional landscape. And I guess maybe I'm not the quickest at that either. It takes a while for me to figure out, oh, this character's thinking this, or this character's feeling that way. But as important as that has been all the way through, it feels extra important now because this is it. This is the end. And endings matter, man. A bad ending, you can have a really good story, and if it has a bad ending, it really hurts. Just as a random example, I just watched the HBO Watchmen show from, when did that come out, 2019-ish? And it's a really good show, but the ending is just kind of and it's damn it, it's really just such a bummer. There's so many good things that happen all the way through, and it's not that the ending's bad, but it feels so much less polished than the journey. And the two things matter, The journey was great, but it's hard to recommend that show now, or it would be a lot easier if it had an ending that was at that same degree of quality. Meanwhile, if you watch something that's kind of half-assed, and then you get to the end and the ending's really cool, that can go a long fucking way. So anyway, yeah, I want this ending. I think endings are way important. Way important. So I certainly don't want to fumble at this point. So I'd prefer to go slow, as always. Same old, just creeping along, just slowly inching along to make sure that the little emotional dots, the emotional reality makes sense to me all the way through this story. But I just thought I'd give a quick little example, because this just happened yesterday. But you could take this one example and just telescope it out. Just imagine 80 of these. Just every day it's one of these. But this is why each little step is taking so long. So we're at the point where Sarat has evacuated the station. She's talking to Quaylam. Again, it's funny that, this is the same essential scenario I described last episode when there was snow everywhere. Now all the snow's gone and it's like I haven't gotten anywhere. These two characters were standing across from each other having their final conversation, and they're still having it. In the actual book, what is this, like fucking 3 pages or something? This will be mere moments to any reader, but for me, this is a season. But hey, that's my dumb method, and I was gonna say I'm sticking to it. It's not. I don't have any other option. It's just the only way that I can proceed. This is slow and steady. But basically, Quaylam is freaked the fuck out. Sarat has already set off some explosives just to show off the extent of what's going on here. And it rattled him a lot more than she realized it would. His fight or flight reflex goes off. And she realizes now that's just talking about that old conversation that they had way at the start about if they got in a fight, who would win. Now that Sarat's connected to the station, connected to the Accomulon, she basically has the internet now. She can look things up, she can know things. She knows now that if they got in a fight, if his fight response went off and he just fucking dove at her and put his fucking stingy tentacles all around her, she would absolutely lose. He could very easily poison her to death or sting her, whatever the fuck it is that he does. She would not survive. She would have to set off some explosives to blow him away. Get out of here. And hopefully not kill him and not kill herself while trying to do this. It would just be terrible. It would be a bad situation. So she realizes she's fucked up. She's rattled this guy way more than she meant to. She's got to calm him down. So that's the point in the conversation they're at. She's trying to explain things to him, trying to get him to not react on impulse. And she's done that. He's at least, his impulses have subsided now. He's at least just stuck in place. And she thinks maybe if she keeps talking, it'll be helpful. As long as she's talking, that gives him an excuse to not have to act right now. He doesn't have to make any choices. He can just stand there and just let his body acclimate to the situation, hopefully calm down a bit. So she's just talking to him, one-sided conversation, and he says, look, shut up, please. Will you please shut the fuck up? So that's the point I was at now, where they're just standing across from each other, not talking. But the next beat I've got to get to, the next step to get us to the end of this book, is she does have more things she needs to say. But he literally just told her to shut the fuck up. So it's a small thing, but it's just, how do you get from two people standing quietly across from each other, and one of them has asked, don't talk, I don't want you to talk, but that person needs to talk. And it seems like a small thing, but how do you get there? And it makes me think of William Gibson, who was kind of the father of cyberpunk, He came up with a lot of virtual reality and internet theories that turned out to be more or less true. But I saw an interview where he said one of his inspirations for coming up with cyberspace, and virtual realities and digital worlds and stuff was just that when writing, he just found the nuts and bolts of basic writing unexpectedly difficult. Just something like standing up, walking across the room, opening a door and going out. Sounds like the easiest thing in the world, but just for his writing style and his predilections and just what felt good to him, he couldn't find a good way to describe those things. And I think you can actually feel that in his writing, because his writing kind of kept getting more and more contemporary, because his cyberpunk books were quite a ways in the future. But my favorite books of his were the Bridge trilogy, and they were like near future, just set a little bit in the future. And they were quite excellent to read because so much of that stuff has already come true. He was very prescient. But then he started writing books that were not at all set in the future. They were literally just set in the present. And I couldn't get through those. I just found them really boring. And I was like, I wonder if this is what he's talking about. Like, he kind of knew this about himself, and I guess maybe he never quite solved it. But when he's writing about normal stuff, it's just fucking boring. He's just not good at it. But how do you be good at it? It's not necessarily something people even really talk about that much because it's so taken for granted. Like, what do you mean? Just get up and walk across the room and open the door. Just, get up and walk across the room and open the door. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, how is that an issue? But it is, because if you make it all flowery and fancy, that's annoying. Nobody wants to read that. But if you just make it really bland, that's boring and no one wants to read that. My personal solution, as much as I've come up with one for any of this, is just minimalism. Just try to keep it brief to the point. Keep it clear. Don't use big words. Don't use long sentences. Just explain what's happening in simple, clear, quick language, and try to make the emotional part of the story the interesting part. The character personalities, the psychological profiles, the actual nuts and bolts of what's happening in my stories is not probably that interesting and is not that important. So much so that, I give it away in the title. What's going to fucking happen in this story? I'm not trying to hide it because that's not the main event. That's not why we're here. So I at least try to just make all that stuff as easy to digest as possible. But yeah, in the case of William Gibson, just not wanting to have to write about people walking across the room and opening the door, he kind of developed virtual reality. What if we're just flying through the fucking internet? And what if it's hackers, What if it's just like, whoa, we're in the digital cyberspace and we're stealing information from a giant corporation, but it's all metaphorized by us flying through data. It's just way cooler, way more fun, and for him way easier to write. And it really turned out cool. He kind of invented a thing. So in my case, it's not walking across the room and opening a door, because I would just write, walk across the room, open the door. Maybe it's a little bland, maybe it's a little boring, but let's just make it to the point. Let's just get to the next thing. For me, it's the little emotional bits like that. It's like the emotional equivalent of opening the door. Because realistically, in the real situation, if you're Sarat the Rhino Girl and you have more things to say to this guy, but he is very agitated and rattled and he's just asked you to shut up. In real life, you just wait. You just stand there. You might stand there for a while until it feels like it's okay to talk. But that's one thing I guess I've just kind of noticed about my own writing, or that I just kind of have been doing without necessarily deciding I was going to do this. It's just how I do things. Is there are not breaks in time. Like, each chapter is its own day. So there can be a break between chapters of different indeterminate lengths. But within a chapter, there's never a later that afternoon, or the next day, or even they stood there for 5 minutes and didn't talk. That's just not how anything has happened in this book up to this point. It's each moment to moment to moment is described. Maybe not, say, if Sarat was walking across the station. Then I might say she's walking across the station and she comes upon this. I'm not going to describe each little moment. But when she's engaged with talking to someone, which is almost always Quaylam, there's no skipping. It's just now the microscope, we turn the fine focus knob and we focus in and we look at each moment. We look at each step of the interaction. I literally just can't write, she stood there for 5 minutes until he calmed down. I can't do that. I haven't done that yet, and I'm not going to do that now. But, I was sitting at a coffee shop yesterday and just staring at the screen type of shit, and it's like, I just don't know. I don't have it. It's such a dumb little thing. It's such a simple little thing. But that's enough for me to pack it up for the day, or to work on something else, or do whatever the fuck I did, and just park my brain at that point and just be like, okay, that's what we got to think about. And then as I'm walking around or as I'm going to bed that night or whatever, just at some point during the day, I gotta let my subconscious roll that moment around in my mind until I come up with a thing. And I did. It was that evening as I was getting ready to get into bed. I kind of had to jog myself a little of just like, okay, hey, think about that, by the way. You got to think about that. Getting ready to go to bed is probably a good time when your brain's a little looser. But basically, I guess what I came up with is, so they're standing across from each other. Talking needs to be done, but they need to wait. Waiting needs to be done before the talking can be done. So how do I describe that? How do I write it? And what I thought about is, because I'm always talking about these emotional realities and the internal landscape of these characters, and I deliberately don't really describe the physical environment that much, I kind of thought like, well, maybe this would be a good time. If this is the last chapter, there's a lot of lasts going on here. Last time we meet, last time we talk, last time we discuss this, last time we discuss that. This is also the last time to just describe Quaylam, because it's been a thread throughout the story is that Sarat's kind of internalized xenophobia is not purely philosophical. In fact, maybe it's not so much, because she doesn't know that much about this other species. She never knew and she never cared, and she still doesn't. It's really more just fundamental. I'm one type of creature and you're a different one. I look like a rhino and you look like a fucking squid. You're fucking weird looking. You're all fucked up. Which, again, like I said way back at the start of this podcast, I just feel like that is, it's more interesting to me to deal with the alien species that don't get along rather than the Star Trek The Next Generation, everybody gets along thing, even though I love Star Trek The Next Generation, but that's not what I would do, because I don't believe it. I just don't believe you can have, again, people, we all look the same. We're just tiny little variations of each other. And there's so much xenophobia and so much cultural fear of one another on the earth that, if you ramp that up to aliens, it's going to be out of control. It's going to, I think, hit Lovecraftian levels of, I don't even like to look at you because your hand is a squid tentacle. What the fuck? So obviously she's been on this ship for a while now. She's quite used to this guy. But I thought this is the last time to address that. If she's just got to stand here and wait before she can say the next thing she has to say, she can just look at him. She can stare at his body and see where we're at with that. So that's what I'm going to write today. And my assumption is, we'll see as I sit down and write what comes to me, but I think, she's in a better spot with that. Where earlier in the story, she literally could barely look at, it wasn't so bad to look at his main body and his head, because his head's just a smooth thing, and his body's mostly cased in a little suit to make him look more humanoid. But she hated looking at his hands and his feet, like the really delicate motor instruments of his body, because they just they just repulsed her, you know? So at this point, we're beyond that. Now it's almost more of a fascination thing, especially now that she realizes, like, if this was a barbarian versus the scholar debate we've been having this whole time, it's a little disconcerting to realize that even if she's the barbarian, she would still lose on that front, because these creepy, stingy hands that he has could easily kill her. He's not only the scholar, he's also stronger than her. But I also thought, along the lines of how I've been retooling this whole ending to be more soft, to not be like, oh, look at me, I'm imperious. Because again, my original idea was kind of, in order to get her over the hump of her own shell shock and her own depression, that just the pure adrenaline rush joy of fucking shit up, it can really get you over some humps, you know? It's like, even if it's not the healthy way to proceed, sometimes I think it's okay to proceed in the unhealthy way if it at least gets you moving, it at least gets you past whatever blockage is in front of you, and then you can sort it out after that. But now that this new ending is not bombastic like that, now I was thinking, in this quiet moment, where not only is it quiet between them, it's insanely quiet in this station. It's never been this quiet because everyone is evacuated. They're the only ones left. It's just absolute quiet. He's additionally asked for her to be quiet for a fucking minute. Everything is silent. And she's just looking at this guy who has just moments before almost sprung at her, almost against his will, because he's so scared. He's so freaked out. And the ultimate arbiter of if I think I have a good idea or not, when I thought of that, I got like that little lump in my throat. Again, I was very exhausted and tired, but that can be helpful. Kind of breaks down the barriers between you and your own emotional defenses. But I thought how she could look at this guy who she has kind of inadvertently almost come to like this guy, because he's literally her only friend in the whole fucking world, you know? Her home planet blew the fuck up, and ever since then, she's only really hung out with this guy. And this is it. She's never gonna see him again. But that still feels like abstract. She kind of knows that's true, but that's the kind of thing that probably won't sink in for some time. That's not, you know, emotionally distressing in this moment. But what is just seeing how distressed he is. Just seeing this alien physiology and looking at this body and seeing the evidence that she can now recognize to some degree of the stress and the pressure that this guy is under right now, that she has caused. You know, this is all her fault. And in her own weird way, she thinks it's kind of a good thing. You know, she thinks it's a shame that this guy lived his whole life on this space station doing research. It just seems pointless. So if he, you know, has to go off and have an adventure, even if it's something that she kind of forced upon him, she thinks that will be better for him. And she's gonna, you know, it's gonna happen anyway. You know, she wants to destroy this place more than she cares about anything else. So it's gonna happen. But as a side effect, like, this could be good for him. This could be cool. But it's not gonna be easy. And just in this moment, she's looking at this other being who really never did anything but be nice to her, who's having the worst day of his life. And maybe not even that she probably doesn't really recognize so much that it's her fault, you know? She probably has a hard time seeing it like that. Maybe later she'll realize that more. Because to her, this all just feels inevitable. Like this whole situation of her planning explosives everywhere on the station and blowing this place the fuck up just seemed like it had to be done. In her weird, crazy brain, this just felt like this is like a natural disaster. This is something that had to happen. However, putting this guy under this level of stress was not ever really part of what she cared to do. It just is, again, just a side effect. It's just happening. But seeing him like that, she feels bad for him. She feels a little upset seeing someone else be that upset. But again, because she's this weird fucking rhino person, that might not even have crossed her mind unless she were kind of forced to contemplate it, as she has been, by him saying, please be quiet. And they just have to stand there silently. This finally gave her enough time to stop running her mouth, to stop trying to justify this insane situation that she's caused to happen, just to look at this guy who his whole way of life is now gone. His home world is about to be gone, you know? Again, it's just a space station. It's just a research center. In some ways, it's not that big a deal, but it has been where he's lived his entire life. So I'm not going to state it directly, because again, I don't know if this is the kind of thing she will even realize until later. But she's essentially orchestrated a situation to do to someone else what happened to her. You know, her home planet was destroyed and she was left all alone. And now this guy's home fucking, not home world, but home station is about to be gone and he's going to be all alone. And then from there, I believe it will feel appropriate for her to break the silence and to continue with this final conversation that they're having, the stuff that she wants to impart to him before he goes. You know, not any kind of big profound shit, just it's gonna be dangerous out there. You don't know what could happen. The Accumulan's coming with me. You've lived your whole life with this sentient space station and you're not even gonna have that. So I just don't want to send you out there in this state, you know? So yeah, that's what I'm going to do today. But again, that's just, again, like, I just wanted to use that as a quick example, once again, to try to justify my method of this insane, slow daily writing that I do. Because I just feel like all that stuff is good stuff and is useful and interesting. And like, I wouldn't have wanted to miss that. I wouldn't have wanted to skirt by. And I find, especially in particular, this genre, sci-fi is so easy to shortcut. You know, like, hey, just go jump in the escape vessel and go jet off through space. We've all played Space Quest. We've all watched Star Wars. We're all very familiar with grand space adventures. Like, it's very easy to just, hey, whatever, go get in the ship and fly, man. Sci-fi is a very easy genre to sidestep the kind of emotional reality of things. Where if this was a contemporary version of the same situation, like, hey, I'm gonna give you supplies, I'm gonna give you a bunch of water and food, and like, you'll be okay. You'll be able to make it to the next encampment, probably no problem, but it's across a desert, and you gotta go walk across that desert all by yourself for maybe weeks. But hey, don't worry, I gave you a compass, I gave you water, you'll probably be fine, but that doesn't mean it's gonna be easy. You know, that character is gonna be stressed the fuck out. So this is just the space opera version of the same thing. It would be very easy not to acknowledge how stressful this is for him. And it's kind of doubly useful because for whatever little, you know, I don't know, see, that's the weird thing with this character, Sarat the Rhino Girl, is she's certainly no kind of fucking hero. She's just a crazy fucking rattled, messed up teenager who makes bad fucking weird choices. But, you know, just because to her it feels like for my own emotional survival, this is what I'm going to do. But if there is any kind of redemption for her, at the very least, it's something like this. Like, at least she can recognize, now that it's the very last moment and it's way too late to change anything, but at least she can recognize at the last fucking moment what effect she's having on other people. Doesn't mean she won't do it again in the future. Doesn't mean she even regrets it. But she at least can see it. That's as much as I'm not trying to make any huge points with this fucking story necessarily. I hope that it will be something people can, maybe unravel something about their own internal landscape by reading this story, that I've tried to present how I feel about things as carefully as I can. The point is definitely not to have a point, like, here's what I'm trying to tell you, here's my thing to impart. It's just, hey, do you feel like this? Maybe you do. And maybe it'll help you figure out what that means, or what's going on in your own internal life by reading this weird little story. So Surratt's not a hero, she's not a villain, it's just not that kind of story. But she doesn't need to just be a total dick, Although in my original ending, that was kind of how it was, and it's just not that way anymore. I think I'm just rambling at this point. You're just gonna have to take my word for it, okay? Someday you'll get to read this book, and hopefully it was all worth it. But yeah, multiply that by every single day, over and over and over and over, every little thing. It's very hard to get from each step to the next. And I just don't want to miss stuff like this. I don't want to skip out on this. Because again, this is a good example of, it would have been the easiest thing in the world yesterday to just write, they stand silently for several minutes before Surratt says, and then all of this would be gone. I would have none of this. And this is the point. This type of stuff is the whole reason I'm writing this story, is the granular details of what's going on in these characters' heads. It's the whole fucking reason. So I can't skip the steps. I can't miss these things. So there's a writing update. And I guess let's just finish with a quick travel update. So yeah, I've been having these weird medical problems where when I sit down, it causes this pain to build up in my abdomen area. And I was having a very hard time seeing doctors about it. But I finally did, despite our horrible medical system in Eastern Canada. I got an ultrasound, and what I found out from the doctors, I don't know, it's not good news, but it's not terrible news, I guess. It's weird news. It is disturbing news, I'll say. It's the news of getting old. As you get older, it's just, every old person talks about it, and it's inevitable. But it really is true. It happens to everyone, and it's just disturbing and weird. It's that your body just starts to not be what it was. So that episode I did a little bit ago about anxiety 2, where right before COVID, I went to see a doctor about my chronic shoulder pains and just my method for getting over the anxiety of doing stuff like going to see a doctor, which is essentially the same as how I write, just take it in tiny, slow pieces, a little bit every day. But basically, I learned in that case I have scoliosis, and there's nothing that can be done. He's just like, hey, well, if it starts to really bother you, do some rehab stretches and stuff and just take painkillers. Enjoy having a sore shoulder for the rest of your life. I was like, all right, I just never had a doctor tell me that before. So this is like that, just worse. Is I got an ultrasound, and it turns out this pain that I've got is a cyst. It's just a buildup of fluid. I guess it's above one of my testicles. Apparently it's really common. Happens all the time. And it probably just happened from some kind of physical strain that then caused fluid to start building up in this one spot. Or it could have just happened for no fucking reason. It's weird when you look this stuff up. And so many people have these things. But I guess, you just don't talk about it, you just deal with it. But it's all on a spectrum. Some people have these cysts and they just don't notice them. They're just like, whatever, it's just a fluid buildup, not a big deal. Some people have them so they hurt all the time. So I'm kind of lucky that I'm in the middle, where mine only hurts when I sit down. It just causes pressure to build up and pain to start to build up. But on the other hand, it's not dangerous. Once I stop sitting, the pain will go away. And that's why I was having these chronic pains all last summer, is because I didn't know sitting was what was causing it to happen. It was ironic. I assumed hiking around like this was what would aggravate my pain and sitting would help. But I was completely wrong. This is fine. I can just hike around up hills and through woods all day and that doesn't matter. But if I sit, this pain starts to build up. And again, it was never more than like a 2 or 3 out of 10, but it was just there, just this nagging pain. So I realized as long as I don't sit down, the pain doesn't build and I'm pretty much okay. But, I set up a standing desk at home. I try to stand whenever I can at coffee shops if there's a counter or something. And at least when I do sit down, because I'm sitting very little in a given day, it's not that bad. But it's weird, it has changed my whole life in some ways for the better. Standing all the time has not been a bad thing. I think I'm in better shape. I can stand all day, for example. I couldn't do that before. Now it's just like, whatever, just stand. Seems fine. But I presumed this was all just temporary until I could get fixed and I could sit again. But basically there are things they can do for cysts like this, but it involves surgery, which is dangerous. My uncle, actually, how my dad passed away 2 years ago, his brother just died a few months ago. I think I'm the oldest living McNally male at this point in the family, which is also disturbing. But yeah, he died in a surgery. He was older, of course. But surgery's dangerous. You obviously don't, I was very stressed out about having to get a surgery. So on the plus side, I don't have to get a surgery because sometimes they can help, but apparently just the way these cysts are, if they do a surgery to remove it or if they drain it, oftentimes it just comes back. And by not putting pressure on it, it might be getting slowly better. It's very hard to tell because it goes so slow. It's a very slow healing process. But it's not getting worse. But I just kind of got the same thing as before, where they just said yeah, this is pretty fucked up, but it's just the roll of the dice. Everybody's body gets weird as they get older. Their advice to me was, if it hurts, just take painkillers. Obviously my main concern is flights, long flights. It's going to be extremely uncomfortable to sit on a long flight. But at least now I know it's not dangerous. It's okay for me to do that. And at the other end, just take some painkillers and then go back to my routine of not sitting down. So it's just it's like both things. On the one hand, wildly disturbing. Even just to say it right now feels crazy. I just can't sit down. That's just how it is now. That's fucking nuts. But on the other hand, it could be so much worse. As far as chronic pains go, this is very easy to manage. And if you just throw a dart at any other random person with a chronic ailment, it's probably much worse than this. This is kind of as easy as it can get. And you just kind of get used to it. I was thinking how when COVID first started, just how quickly everyone got used to seeing people wear masks, where it was weird to watch a TV show where people weren't wearing masks. And you're like, huh? What? I've already internalized that the world is different now. It's kind of like that now for me, but it's just for a one person thing, where if I'm watching a TV show and someone just sits down, I'm like, wow, what? People can just sit down? They get on a subway and they sit down. Because I've just already, it's been almost a year now of this, but I've just completely internalized the idea that you just stand whenever possible. Anytime that you can stand, you stand. If I could get a standing room only flight, I'm the only person in the world who would take an extremely long flight where I didn't have a chair. It would actually be better for me. Standing would be more comfortable. So I'm a little nervous, obviously, about this. But now that I've finally done all the stuff, there's nothing else to do. Basically, the guy was like, hey, if it does get worse in 8 months or a year, drop me a line and then we'll see what we can do. But in the meantime, just continue not to sit, and hopefully this cyst situation will shrink on its own. But it might not. It might just sort of stay as it is. And again, like I was saying, there's a lot of upsides to it. People always say that sitting is the new smoking, but I was like, I don't even know what that means. But I remember I went to see that band Nada Surf in Vancouver. I don't know when that was, 2017? And I noticed that I literally had a hard time standing up for like a 2.5 hour fucking show. My legs were really hurting. Where now I could do that no problem. I stand up all fucking day, Like it probably is healthier. I think it's even helped my crappy shoulder a little bit. But it's just disturbing not to have the option. It's weird to go into a coffee shop and like the timer starts ticking. Like, how long have I got here? How long can I sit here before I start feeling little stingy pains start? But anyway, again, it is what it is. I don't feel sorry for myself because again, I really feel like everyone else who has a problem has a worse problem than me. And for me, that really works. Like the video I did, the story of Iron Mouse, one of the things I said in that was like, hey, if nothing else, the story of Iron Mouse, who is very sick, has CVID and is kind of confined to her house. Like if at the very least, maybe this will makes your own problem seem not as bad. And man, I got some comments. People were upset that I said that. Like, how dare you minimize my problems, blah, 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 or the problems of others. But I really do think that's an okay thing to say. There are people in the world who are just fucked with a capital F. And if that's not you, then I feel like you're, how much complaint equity do you really have? Yeah, this is very fucked that I can't really sit down, and maybe this will just be how it is from now on. But there are all these upsides, and it's a chronic pain that I can easily manage now that I know what causes it to flare up. I don't want to run the pain Olympics, the fucking trauma Olympics. I fucking hate that shit. No, your problems aren't actually that bad, fucker. They're really not. And I'm talking to myself, not to you. But it's true. Because what I'm trying to get to is that I still am basically living the charmed life of, particularly now that my poor old dad passed away, I just don't have to get a job again. Last job I had was at a cheesecake shop in Vancouver. I'm not saying that wasn't important work, but if I don't have to, then I would rather not. I think it's more important to work on my novel, like I'm that guy. I'm the fucking douchebag who has the inheritance, who works on the novel. That's me. So, that's such a privileged position that, it's, I don't know, it's like if you had to pick, I guess maybe that's a weird example. I don't think I would take that, like if it's a role-playing game and they're like, hey, all right, as long as you live frugally and travel cheaply and everything you own fits in one book bag, you can probably just Airbnb around and write a novel. However, the price is you can't sit down. That's pretty fucking weird. But that's not how it is. Everything is just random. I just happen to have these two circumstances. But the point I'm trying to get to is there's no more reason to wait for a doctor. There is no waiting for a surgery because the surgery is not going to happen. So I'm free to travel again. And I was definitely dragging my feet because, COVID. COVID has been so easy in Atlantic Canada because there's so few people here it's a little disturbing to go out into the wide world. But I feel like at this point, knock on wood, people get COVID and at least they don't die from it. It's just extremely unpleasant. So I still have a lot of things I need to sort out. I have to get a new passport because I can't renew the temporary one I got in Japan. But whatever, a bunch of stuff I got to sort out. Plus, I do feel a little weird where I've been doing this podcast with my mom every week while I've been here. It's called Revisiting, where we watch an old TV show every week. We revisit an old show. You can find a link at keithcourage.com. And once I travel off into the wide world, we're going to try to keep doing it just online or whatever. But it doesn't feel great, even though my dad died 2 years ago. It doesn't feel great to just leave my mom alone in the house with my crazy schizophrenic brother. But I can't stay here forever. This place is driving me crazy. And yeah, I just want to get back to Japan, and then whatever else happens around it is a bonus. So my plan is to, again, kind of take it a little slow. I thought it's kind of neat to, instead of having a positive goal, I found it easier to look at it from a, what do I want to avoid? How do I avoid the negatives? So I want to leave my hometown before it snows again. So I gave myself a rough out of October. I told my roommate guy, let's plan for October. October 1st, expect me to not be here. And then I want to try to take things a little slower, again, just to see how traveling goes. So I'm not totally sure what I'm going to do. Go to Montreal, go to Vancouver, I don't know. But certainly not just jump on a flight and go straight to Japan, because it would be crazy long. So I'll probably break it up, Part of me kind of wants to try to do the Amsterdam loop like last time, but I think maybe I'll just go, make my way across Canada to Vancouver, and the Vancouver to Japan flight, again, it's long, but that's about as short as it can get for me. But I was thinking, if I leave in October and I spend a month in this city, a month in that city, creep my way across Canada, then the problem I came to was but that's right around Christmas. Canada is just kind of depressing in the winter anyway, because it's all overcast and dark. And Christmas is just that type of thing where when you spend Christmas all by yourself in some big shitty city, it's just not fun. I've had Christmases in Vancouver and Christmases in Toronto, and they're just you can't really hang out with anybody because they all have family in the area and they're doing Christmas stuff. You're just kind of by yourself and it just feels bad. However, that's where I thought, but what if I make it my goal to get to Tokyo before Christmas? That I feel like will be different. Christmas in Japan, that will be like my Christmas gift. I made it. I made it back finally after all this time. And it'll be neat to be there in the winter. That'll be different. And then theoretically, because you can stay for 3 months and then you've got to leave Japan, but then you can come back for another 3 months. So if I do that, theoretically, my second bite at the apple will be around springtime. And again, what I'll do in between, I don't know. But that's my basic plan. Get my affairs in order, get out of here before it snows, and then get to Japan before Christmas. And in the meantime, just continue creeping my way through this novel, literally a fucking sentence at a time. So anyway, there's that update, there's all that stuff. Thank you for listening. Song of the day. This is a weird one where this band is called Claypex, and they were basically a dubstep band. And I really didn't like dubstep at the time because it really felt super generic. Every dubstep album I ever heard all sounded the same. But I was not listening to great stuff, obviously. I was listening to how fucking Korn did a dubstep album, and it's well, this isn't any good. But I was always curious, is there more to this genre? There has to be something to it. But this band Claypex, they've just slowly become less and less dubstep, and at this point they haven't put anything out in a little bit, but their newer stuff is very much not dubsteppy anymore. But then there's stuff in the middle, where this song I'm gonna play, it's called Sunrise, and I don't think you would maybe even recognize that it is a bit of a dubstep song if I didn't say it, you know? It's very light. It's got weird noises in it. It's got some wub wub wubs. But it's easy to, like, it sounds like Streets of Rage 3 music. It just sounds fucking weird, like weird video game music more than anything else. And what I think is interesting about this song is whenever I go to bed at night, I always listen to just rain noises. But I've started just to ease myself even into the rain noise. Now I've got just a two song playlist where it's half an hour of rain sounds, but before it is this song. And this is not what you would think of as a gentle lullaby, go to sleep song. But I think this illustrates maybe why I'm such a bad sleeper. This is how my brain feels when I'm trying to go to sleep, like how annoying it is to try to go to sleep when your brain doesn't want to go to sleep. Is that this song is what keys in more to my brain's wavelength and lets me at least just lie there for 3 or 4 minutes to just get used to the idea that I'm lying there with my fucking eyes closed and the plan is to go to sleep. Because this song, it's not extremely loud, but it's not quiet. It's not fast, but it's not slow. It's just like not fast enough. It's this weird tempo that is very unusual feeling to me. And it never quite takes off, you know? It's like this weird dance song that just never gets out of second gear. It just stays in second gear, makes some wobble wobs, and then it's over. And then it segues into the rain sounds, and then theoretically I fall asleep. So, as an illustration of what is wrong with my brain, here is my idea of a lullaby, Sunrise by Claypex. Once again, thank you for listening. I'm glad somebody out there gives a shit about all the fucking dumb details of my life, and I will see you next time.